Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. We are in week 13 already. Means we're coming toward the end of the course, and I'm not going to end the course early by any stretch, but we're kind of doing some end of course activities over the next 2 weeks, and I think that's appropriate. We have really covered a lot of stuff this term. I'm pretty happy about that. I'm also pretty happy about the way the projects seem to be going. And we'll find out whether that, was false hope on my part when we all meet next week. But I'm hoping that everybody understands that the types of projects that we're working on right now, the beginning of the semester when we talked more about the outsides and bollards and delay tactics and CSS210 and things like that, and then the second half where we talked really about electronic systems and technology, I'm hoping everybody's getting a flavor for what a physical security manager does and understands that I was tried to make this as close to realistic as possible, considering that we're all students and we don't have a background in other disciplines. Excuse me, that would be helpful, right? You don't have a lot of work experience in the field, but still, I think you will find that when you get into your first corporate security job, for those of you that go that route, or even Homeland Security job where you're doing a physical security project, you will find some of this useful and familiar. So in keeping with that familiarity concept, trying to make sure it kind of matches what you will do in the future, this week we're going to be doing peer reviews. And peer reviews are generally not called that necessarily in business. They may be a project review. It could be a value engineering session, as we've talked about before. But essentially, it's a chance to take the best features of everybody's work and bring them together for a best effort plan. Not one of you has the perfect plan. Now, some of your plans are really great and would do very well if put into practice tomorrow. I mean, you could take these if you were asked to design security for a warehouse and you took this plan for the interior and presented it, I think that you would have people say, yes, that's what we're going to do. But is it best? Well, we don't know because there's always something you can do a little better because there's always something that you kind of missed and you don't know that sometimes for years. It gives us the opportunity to close those gaps. So every one of you, and myself included somewhere in our plan, is a gap, right? Something we missed, something we didn't think about. The alarm contacts we put on the overhead doors. I may put mine down on the ground. You may put yours halfway up the door. One of us is going to see that our contacts get damaged at some point. Which one's going to be first? Is it from somebody with a forklift that hits the one on the side? Is it from somebody who drops something and grabs the wiring somehow from the ones on the floor? We don't know. But one of us is, I won't say wrong, but one of us is more right than the other because their system will last a little longer, right? So it gives you the opportunity to discuss those things. And then the big thing is that it brings you the opportunity normally, and in our case, we can do that too, even with the experience that you guys don't have necessarily in corporate security. The experience that you have from living for nearly 20 years or more than 20 years is good enough to bring to the table in this type of environment because you're going to bring your non-security lens into thinking about how we protect people. And believe it or not, when we talk about 30 people in this class, and many of you have held jobs since you were 15 years old or 16 years old, let's say 16, average age, say 20, so there's 4. We got 80 years of experience, of non-security experience, not counting my experience. 80 years is a long time and a lot of experience gained. And if we can collectively use that experience to our benefit, then we should do that. And we're going to be using the non-security stuff kind of in a way to make our projects better. But why would we even want to get together? If we all have decent plans, why would we worry about that? Well, it all comes down to basic team dynamics and group decision and individual decision making, which this isn't a class in, but I can relate it back to security pretty easily in 2 cases that we'll talk about. So when you're making a decision by yourself, it's fast, right? You can make a decision on the fly. You did your drawings, and you may have done them in 10 minutes. You may have done them in 2 hours, but you made the decisions as to what devices to put in pretty quickly in most cases. And one of your designs is probably best in class, right? So meeting with your group and making some changes may actually slightly downgrade what you're doing. But make no mistake, we don't have 30 best-in-class designs. You can only be one, right? And if we're going to make it get 29 more pieces of information that may make everything a little better, I'm willing to go that route. But also accountability, right? Individual decision making. I know who made the decision. I know it's yours. You turned in your work. You made the decision. You're the one who gets the credit for it, right? Pretty easy. But you also have a lot less ideas. I mean, you have a lot of big ideas, just like I have a lot of big ideas, but 30 of you combined have a lot more. Trying to say what of the designs is the best, I gave out some little awards, at least on paper, last week or week before, on some designs that I thought were very good, but they were good for different reasons. I can't tell you which one's the best. I can tell you which ones had certain features that made them stand out. But when we look at group decision making, you can piggyback off others' ideas. And oftentimes, one person has an idea, another person has a different idea, and you meet in the middle and come up with the best thing. You also, once you make a group decision, I think that the group commits to that idea. If they're smart, they commit to the idea of the group, and then everybody's committed. You have better buy-in. No one's going to say, I told you so, if the group decided it and the group agreed to it. I also think that team building is just a smart thing to do, because when you work on teams with people and you compromise and you support what they did and they support what you did, and you actively debate if you think you're right, but do it in a respectful way, I think you build better team dynamics overall. You build better relationships, and as a security manager, that's certainly something that you're going to benefit from. There are a couple things that we have to look at. Groupthink and social loafing. We'll talk about those in a second. But let's look at how we can show that a group decision or a group thought might have done us better in security. So let's go back to 1198. Chateau Guillard, Richard the Lionhearted built this fortress, and he built it in 2 years. Most fortresses and chateaus, castles in that time would take 20 to 30 years to build. He wanted it built quickly, and therefore there were a lot of people, quite frankly, that died in the building of this thing because he worked them to death. But between 1196 and 1198, he built this chateau and this fortress, and it was thought to be impenetrable. French soldiers stormed it in 1203. It had movable bridges. It had moats. Defenses kept the French out for 7 months. They started in September of 1203, and they didn't take the place until September of 1204. And there were a number of really interesting things. If you're interested in it, do some research, because a number of people from the local village moved into the fortress when the French started to attack, and there weren't enough provisions. So Richard and his company decided to let them leave, and the French did not attack them as they left because they were civilians. Finally, the French said, wait a minute, if we just leave them in there, they'll starve themselves out. So then they wouldn't let people leave. Kind of an interesting story. But the French eventually gained access through a latrine chute. The moats that you see around those castles are moats for a reason, and sanitation in the 1200s being what it was, you can imagine that there weren't fresh water and lily pads growing in those moats, right? They were pretty nasty. And the French went through, allegedly into an area. My wife corrects me and says that while they were in there, they went through a back window in a chapel, which wasn't in the original specification, built by Richard's brother, the chapel, and he added a window because he thought it would be nice. And that's how, once they got into the main compound, they went through the window and through the chapel and came out into the actual center. But think about that. If the person who designed the latrines were in good communication with the person in charge of protecting the fortress, they would have known they needed to put iron gates inside and outside on those latrines to let things flow through, right? Nasty things flow through, but to also protect from people climbing through. They would have also thought about, what do we do about that window in the back of the chapel, which is a vulnerability, obviously, because that's how, once they got partially into the compound, they got into the rest of it through that window. That wasn't even supposed to be there. But there was no communications, obviously. I mean, this was built fast, and it was built with all the things you could think of, except for communications between the person who was building things like moats and movable bridges to protect it, and the person who put a big hole in the wall that somebody could climb through, so that they could get the sewage system out of the main compound. So a classic example of where a peer review by one or the other, the security person saying, this is what I'm going to put up there. Here, Mr. Sanitation, what do you think? Him saying, well, I've got this hole in the wall. Or the security person looking at the sanitation plan saying, wow, look at these holes here. I've got to do something about that, would have benefited them greatly. And in fact, Richard wouldn't have lost his chateau, and within several years lost all of France, with the exception, I believe, of Normandy. So while those of you in ancient history buffs are going to correct me on my facts on Richard the Lionhearted, the basis still remains, right? There was a hole that should have been discovered had different disciplines gotten together and done a peer review. Now here's a more modern example, a medical research facility in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're talking about somewhere around 1999. That facility spent $3 million a year on security programs and protections. Now it had about, at that time, somewhere around 1,500 employees. It's a sizable medical pharmaceutical research facility, which I'm very familiar. But the spend on security was substantial. Now the building was about 20 years old, which is relatively new by industrial building standards if you think about it. Most of the buildings you go by today that you look at as modern buildings have been around for almost that long. But about 20 years after it opened, some baby rabbits were spotted in a mechanical room that was on the perimeter of the buildings. The land didn't have any fence on it, but the baby rabbits started showing up in this mechanical space in the protected area. And people started thinking, okay, how did two rabbits get in here and have babies, right? This doesn't make any sense. Did somebody leave a door open? How could this happen? Well, it was revealed there was a pond that had a bridge over it. Small pond, had a bridge over it. And underneath that bridge was an access point with a thin metal plate that could be moved out of the way, because the bridge, because you're in Michigan, the bridge was heated with the glycol system. Now, I think those are mostly illegal for environmental reasons, but you ran glycol underneath in pipes, and it kept the ice off the bridge. It also had pipes going out to another building that was on the other side of the bridge that was secured as well. But over time, that thin piece of sheet metal in Michigan winters and things blowing up under, the wind blowing up underneath it, and it eventually just rusted around the rivet points, and it fell, and it went in the pond, and no one saw it. And it left this opening under the bridge that had so many pipes running through it, it had to be made big enough a small person could climb through and come out where the pipes started, which was in that mechanical room inside the perimeter. Now, the rabbits, I'm assuming, went up across through. There were some areas there where a rabbit may just make a hutch, may just sit somewhere, right? And it got cold, and they went in through that hole. It wasn't that high off the ground, right? The ground kind of went up to it. But the metal plate was gone. The rabbits went in, and that's how the baby rabbits got inside. Now, it was big enough for a small person to follow the pipes to get into the protected mechanical room. The security person never even thought about the fact that the bridge didn't get icy. It wasn't their job. They just assumed that the snow removal people did really well. Or if indeed they knew it was heated, it was probably electrical, running, coils through the precast concrete, and that's what heated the bridge. No idea that under the bridge was this big opening that was only secured by a thin metal sheet with some rivets in it holding it in place, right? And it had rivets in it so that you could actually take them out. I think they were screws more than rivets. So you could take them out and access the pipes if there was a leak or a problem. And they just rotted away and fell in. Again, an example, if the person who was defining the piping system had talked to the security person, that probably would have had caging or something put around the pipes so that a person couldn't get through. Very easy to do. Or when the pipes came into the main building, you would have secured around those pipes somehow so that at least you'd be stopped right when you got to the mechanical space and couldn't get into the main facility. Or the other way around, if the security person had said, this is my defined perimeter, Mr. Plumber, heating, whatever the guy is that does this type of work, they would have been able to say, Oh yes, you can certainly get in under the bridge because we have a trapdoor there. And come to find out, once that investigation was done, there were 3 more manhole covers in parking lots that you could climb down, get into small tunnel areas, and come up inside the facility through the manhole covers, which had to be chained down. Again, a peer review by another discipline would have certainly saved us the vulnerability that a person could have broken in. In this case, it wasn't the French coming in to take over Richard the Lionhearted and gain all of France. It was just some baby rabbits, but it could have very well been animal activists, could have very well been people who are anti-vaccines, anti-science, and we would have had a world of hurt because once you were in that mechanical space, you could open the door and you were in the main facility. So I want you to ask yourselves these questions. If you have a team of diverse perspective, would they have possibly considered the mechanical systems in terms of security? And the answer is yes, if you have the right people at the table and you go through the peer reviews. Peers meaning people in other disciplines that are at the same level as you. You're going to do a security project and you invite the safety person. Is there something I'm missing here from an egress perspective? I can't tell you how many times people have put card readers and locks on doors only to find the next day someone has put a piece of duct tape across the electric strike to hold it open because that door's always been open and they need to open it 50 times a day and the security person didn't realize the traffic was at that level. Does your team have people who worked in a warehouse? Your team may have someone who works in a warehouse or a factory. I know for a fact that at least one person in the class is working right now in a factory. Factories and warehouses are very similar. Do they have some unique perspective to say, yes, but if you do it this way, you may have this problem because think about what people do in warehouses, right? Does the place you live or work have locks, access controller cameras, and maybe they're not very effective? And maybe you know why they're not very effective? Well, that may be unique to your place of business. You may work at Sheetz or at Target or at McDonald's or at the mall, and your particular place of work has a camera that doesn't work right because it's too low to the ground or it's too high up or it's, the lighting is terrible or whatever. You bring that unique perspective to this team. When you meet with your team, if someone mentions a camera and they want to put a camera inside of a room that's going to be dark most of the time, you probably should think about that camera at work and what good is it when it's in a dark room, right? Unless you're going to put infrared sensors on it. So think about the things that you do outside of school and outside of this discipline. And then finally, if there's somebody particularly interested in one type of protective measure, if there's somebody on the call, on your team call, that just really likes the idea of readers or cameras or cipher locks or, that's just their forte, then they are likely to have studied it harder than you do and listen to what they have to say. If you can sense somebody's passionate about a certain thing, then let them have their say. And everybody needs to have their say in these meetings. So if we put a big X through individual decision-making, we know we're going to do group decision-making in the next week. We know we want diversity of ideas, and everybody brings in a unique perspective because you're all individuals. I want everybody to just clear your mind and say, I may have done it my way, and I still may like my way in the end, but I'm going to accept the group's idea. If the majority of the group thinks something is right, unless they are absolutely wrong and I can prove them wrong factually, it's not an opinion, it's not a feeling, it's not just my preference, then I suggest that you get on board with the group because that's what you'll need to do in business, and this is a good time to practice it. And then have some fun with the interaction. Seriously, have some fun with looking at each other's drawings and saying, wow, I really hate that about your drawing and I really love that about your drawing, because I think that you're going to learn quite a bit from this experience. Now, down here, we know it's going to take a little longer. That's because we're spending a whole week doing it, right? That's why I dedicated a week to it. Group dynamics like groupthink and social loafing. Let's talk a little bit about those. Social loafing. I love that term. I don't know why. But it's the tendency of some members to put forth less effort while working within a group. We all know those people who draft, right? Drafting, for those who aren't highway drivers, if you've got a car that gets, or a truck that gets poor gas mileage, you go bumper to bumper with a big semi in front of you because the wind will go out around that semi and you will have much less wind resistance and you will save about 3 miles to a gallon of gas. And if that's worth your life, then go ahead and do that. But that's what drafting is. And sometimes people think that they can draft on projects like this. I will come to the meeting, but I won't say much, and I'll just agree with everybody, and then I will just coast through, and we're all going to get the same grade. Not happening. I can pick out loafers in a group like nobody's business. That is one skill set that I have. And I will be asking individual questions of individuals in these meetings. I'm not trying to trick you, but if you were part of a decision, if a group made a decision and decided to put a reader someplace or a camera someplace or an alarm point or used a certain type of equipment, then you will know why. And if you don't know why, it means you didn't participate in the team decision or you weren't paying attention and you were loafing. So keep your wits about you when you're in these meetings. Take notes if you need to understand why the group decided on something. But on the flip side, there's groupthink. And just because everybody says we should do it that way doesn't mean it's right. If you absolutely know something is wrong, then be critical. Don't be mean. Don't be a jerk. Just be critical, right? If the group says, no, I think we should do it this way, I think we should do it that way. If you remember me saying something like, don't do it that way, then speak up. Everybody needs to participate. Our team leaders have been asked to make sure that everybody participates, that everybody has their say, and that everybody agrees, or at least agrees that they will agree to what the groups put forward. So watch out for social loafing. Don't try it because you will get called out on it. And if the group thinks something, but you know it's absolutely wrong, again, factually wrong, then speak up. So in these team meetings this week, that's really what I want to talk about. That's what this lecture is about. I think everyone should present their best drawing that they have. You should look at everybody else's drawings. Put them up on the screen so instead of seeing your face, everybody can see everybody's drawings, right? If you find that there are some things in every drawing that's exactly the same, then I think you bank those. I think if 5 people of reasonable intelligence and good training and good understanding come up with the same answer on something, I'm willing to bet that it's right. And frankly, if we come into the meetings with me and I call you out on something and you tell me that everybody on the group agreed to it, I am going to ask for some discussion on that because you may change my mind. Okay? If you find things that are exactly the same, bank on it. Okay? If one person, however, is totally different, ask them why. And it's fair game to say, well, maybe I just didn't get it right. I don't think I understood it quite. Now that you guys have explained why you did it that way, now that I see yours, I'm more comfortable with it, right? Just don't accept. But if that's the case, then just say that. I didn't understand it, but now I get it. Let's do it your way. Or I did it this way because, I decided to use a cipher lock rather than a reader because then I can save money on readers and field panels because I want to put more cameras in later. Maybe that was your methodology. Explain it. Don't fall in love with your own ideas, but don't discount them right away either. Discuss and decide. If one person is totally different, everybody should red flag and say, Brian, why did you do it that way? You're the only one who did it that way. Why did you do it? And my answer can be one of two things. I did it for this good reason, or I just didn't understand it. And don't be afraid to embarrass yourself in front of others because everybody didn't understand something in this course, right? So that's a great way to go. From that, you will come up with a combined drawing. Okay. Once you get the combined drawing done, what's going to go where, and the team leader should be doing that on the fly as we go along or asking somebody to do it for them as you're having the discussion. Then put that up on the screen. And now say, okay, where's the vulnerabilities? Where is that chapel window? Where's that latrine hole? Where is the plate in the bridge? Right? Are there vulnerabilities? Think like a bad guy. Think like a thief. Think like somebody who wants to break in that facility. How would you do it if you're going to do it? And is it something you can really protect against? No physical security plan is 100%. We didn't talk about the roof of the facility. And there is a well-known break-in where people actually drilled through the roof of a facility and dropped down. Now, your cameras set to motion or your PIRs will probably pick up on those people. Or eventually, while they're in, they have to get out at some point. Easy to drop down from a roof. Semi-easy. Harder to get back up there on a rope carrying what you want to carry out of a place. It's pretty involved. But think like a thief. How would you get around this physical security plan? Now you have your drawing, your team drawing. Now somebody needs to do a budget worksheet while you're all still there. And you can do that as you're going along. We'll talk about that, but it doesn't mean the team leader has to be doing all this stuff at one time. please, if somebody wants to jump in and say, hey, I'll do the budget as we're going along so we can get out of here quick, by all means, efficiency is a good thing. Do your budget worksheet and be under 80K. Okay? Once you got that, now I want you to have a really quick discussion on the unexpected. What are you going to do if me, as the project manager coming into your meeting week 14, says, okay, guys, but we had some trouble with the landscaping contract and it's coming in 50 grand over budget. There's nothing I can do about that because we need to put in the sod. Otherwise, we're going to have runoff. And sod's in short supply because of the drought in Pennsylvania. And so, we're going to have to pay double the price for it to get it here from Ohio. So I need to make up 50 grand. You guys have to pitch in 5,000. Have a quick discussion. If you have to cut 5,000 and now your budget isn't 80,000, it's 75, what would you cut? Then have a discussion. What happens if I say you guys got to pony up 10 grand and your budget is now 70? You need to have those answers prepared. You also then need to have an advisory in your mind. Now, I'm the project manager and I just told you to cut 10,000 and you guys came back and you did that. But you can't tell me that it didn't hurt something, right? If you were spending 80,000 to properly protect the building and I'm telling you to spend 70,000, unless you got coupons for 10K for cameras and card readers, you're taking something out and something is being less protected. It is less than ideal. What advisory would you give the project manager to say, okay, just understand that if we cut this out, we're still protecting the building, but I may not be able to capture this or capture that. Maybe you're going to not record your cameras. You're just going to watch them live. I wouldn't do that, but that would cut 5 grand right there. I think that's about the price I had on the NVRs, 4,500, right? Plus the install, right? You cut 6 grand right there. I think it would be a dumb move, but that's maybe what you decide. Your advisory to me would be, okay, but once something happens, we're going to be able to watch the cameras for triage purposes, but we won't be able to go back and recreate any thefts. Do your final budget worksheet. Be under 80K. Okay, I already said that. Then before you leave, pop open the picture that's in the course shell of the outside of the facility. And I just want you to take a quick look at it. Remember, we're going to put hydrogen tanks on the outside for our forklifts. Remember, we're going to have truck traffic coming in and out. There may be a section, very likely be a section during our conversations of design on the fly. And there's nothing you can do ahead of time other than take a quick look at the outside of the building, be familiar with where things are, what roads are where, so that when we design something on the fly, I'm going to put something on that drawing that's going to cause you to have to think back to the early chapters about bollards and lighting and septed and traffic, how that comes in and out and those kinds of things, just to test to see if you remember some of that stuff and how you can apply it. And then maybe we'll even look at outside cameras and outside alarms and all kinds of good stuff. So just take a quick look. There's no preparation other than take a look so you remember what it looks like from the outside. Okay, so your team leader is responsible for submitting your drawing and budget to me in the Dropbox before we have our team meeting in week 14. That is your homework. So you, unless you're the team leader, don't have anything other than the team meeting and to take it seriously and to prepare for our week 14 defense, if you will, of your proposal. Team leaders will take the final. I suggest they send it out to everybody real quick. Everybody should be watching your email every day during this next week. Check it at least once a day or put an alert onto your cell phone when you get an email from your team leader. Because at some point, I would like them to send you the budget and the drawing and say, here's our finals, guys. Is everybody good with it? And if you don't get back with them by the time they need to post it into the Dropbox, well, shame on you. It's going in and you're going to have to defend it whether you saw it or not. So I suggest you stay very limber on the email. Most everybody has done that. There have been a few who have not responded to team leader emails, and unfortunately, that's going to reflect. But if you're a better artist, or better, if your team leader is a good facilitator, which is why they were selected, but you've seen their handwriting and it's pretty bad, and you're good with computer graphics, or you can draw better, why don't you just take it on with them and say, look, let me just draw this thing up so it looks neat, right? If they don't have a scanner, Can they send it to you somehow and you can, create a scanned drawing better with it? I don't know. But if you're good at computer graphics, I know one student in this class had really nicely designed drawings with computer graphics. If you're good at that, why don't you take that on so that your team looks better? Be a good team member. If the team leader is trying to facilitate the discussion and help with the drawing, it would be nice if somebody would say, I'll do the budget. Just open up that spreadsheet. Just open up a copy of that spreadsheet and start putting in the numbers of devices as you decide what you're going to use. And in the end, it will be done. And if you want to do that, that's being a good team member. Just remember, social loafing is easy to spot because you won't understand what the group did in week 13, and it will show in week 14 when you're being asked questions by me. So look at that. This is a light week for at least this side of the course. The lecture is done. You have team meetings and you have prep work to do. You want to be organized and you want to be ready. There are a lot of hints about what I'm going to ask and what we're going to cover in here. They weren't even hints. They were just out and out. I'm telling you, this is what I'm going to ask you for. I may ask for other stuff, but you can guarantee I'm going to ask you the questions that I proposed in this lecture. So be ready for those. You might even decide that, if it's a question on cameras, that one person will be the spokesperson for cameras. One might be the spokesperson for access control. That's really up to your group, how you organize that, or whether it's first come, first serve, and you let me just call on somebody. If you decide a certain person is a spokesman, so long as the work is equally divided, then I will respect that. You can just tell me if I have a question on cameras, and I may say, Mr. Jones, why don't you tell me about why you put a camera over this door? It's okay for Mr. Jones to say, no, Ms. Smith is the camera specialist here. Okay, then I will re-ask the question to Ms. Smith if you decide to do it that way. If not, then it's just whoever gets asked comes up with the answer. With that, there's no reading to do. There's no assignment other than to approve the drawings and budget when sent to you after your meetings with your team leader. And the team leaders, your assignment is to put them in the Dropbox. Week 14, there will be a short lecture posted at the beginning of the week just to make sure everybody's ready. It'll be a bit of a recap, and I will also then go over what our parameters are for our final papers for those who are doing final papers. If you are not a team leader, then you will do final papers. Team leaders have been exempt from the final paper this year for serving as facilitators. So with that, have a great week. I will look forward to getting something from the team leaders this week. And if you have questions about the project, please reach out to the team leader first and then to me second. Have a great week.